1.4 billion people, the largest, youngest workforce on Earth, and a factory sector 1/10 the size of the country it is meant to replace. That is the strangest gap in the world economy right now. India has more workers than any rival, wages lower than China's, and a government that has staked its future on one promise: make it in India. And yet, manufacturing is just 13% of India's economy. China's is nearly twice that. Every ingredient the textbook demands is on the table. The one result the textbook promises is missing. So, the question this episode takes apart: if India has the people, the youth, and the ambition, why isn't it already the next China? By the end, we will put 3 figures on the answer. Hey, welcome back to the Rise Index, if you're new here. This is where we follow the numbers behind who makes what, who profits, and how economic power really moves. Great to have you. Today, it's India, the country everyone expects to be the next workshop of the world. And to see why it isn't yet, we have to start with the country it's supposed to replace. For 30 years, one country was the answer to almost every "where is it made?" question: China. It absorbed the world's factories, lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, and became the workshop of the planet. But China is changing. Its workforce is aging. Its wages have risen, and a world nervous about depending on a single country is looking for somewhere else to place its factories. The search has a name in boardrooms: China plus one. And this is not a small adjustment. China makes a staggering share of the world's goods: the electronics, the medicines, the parts inside almost everything you own. Moving even a slice of that somewhere else is one of the largest industrial reorganizations ever attempted. The question is not whether the world wants a second option, it is whether any single country is big enough to be one. When people ask who the plus one becomes at full scale, the finger keeps landing on the same place. Not Vietnam, too small; not Mexico, too close to one market; India, the only country with a population and a labor pool in China's league. This matters to you even if you never buy a thing made in India, where the world builds, decides who gets the jobs, who captures the profits, and who writes the rules of the next economy. The last time this map was redrawn, it created the modern world order. So the stakes are simple. If India succeeds, 1 billion plus people get a shot at the ladder. China climbed. If it stalls, the largest young workforce in history arrives at the factory gate and finds the gate half closed by machines. Start with the case for India, because it is genuinely strong. The logic is the same logic that built China. A vast supply of workers pushes wages down. Low wages pull in factories chasing cheaper production. Those factories hire millions, wages slowly rise, and a poor country climbs into the middle class. Labour in, ladder up. It has worked before. And India is not standing still. Its government launched a scheme with a blunt name and a big check behind it. Production, linked incentives. Build here, hit the output targets, and the state pays you to stay. 14 sectors, billions of dollars, electronics, pharmaceuticals, batteries, cars. The headline win is the one in your pocket: the iPhone. For years, assembled in China was practically printed on the glass. Now a growing share of the world's iPhones is assembled in India, by Foxconn, by Tata, enough that India has become one of the largest iPhone assembly hubs on Earth. Read that story on its own, and India looks like China in 1999, right before the takeoff. The factories are arriving. The names are global. The line on the chart points up. And the momentum is real, not just a press release. Global companies are hedging. A pandemic that shut Chinese ports and rising tension between Washington and Beijing taught every boardroom the same lesson. depending on one country, is a risk with a price tag. India is the obvious place to spread that risk. The government has leaned in hard. Faster factory approvals, incentive checks tied directly to how much you produce, whole industrial corridors drawn on the map. If ambition and policy alone decided this, India would already have won. So that is the obvious answer. Population plus low wages plus policy equals the next workshop of the world. It is not wrong, exactly. It is just answering a question the world stopped asking 20 years ago. Because the assembled in India story leaves one number out, and it is the number this whole story turns on. Here is the number. When an iPhone is assembled in India, only a small fraction of its value is actually created in India. The chips, the screen, the camera, the expensive parts are made elsewhere and shipped in. India does the final click together. That is the trap at the center of this episode. Made in India and made by India are not the same sentence. One is a location, the other is control, and they can point in completely different directions. To see why that matters, go back to the year the old rulebook was written, 2001, the year China joined the World Trade Organization. In 2001, cheap labor was a superpower. Automation was crude. If you had millions of low-wage workers, factories came to you almost automatically because there was no cheaper way to make things at scale. Labor was the whole game. India is not industrializing in 2001, it is industrializing now. And now runs on robots, sensors, and software that can do work a human hand used to do. The cheapest worker on Earth is no longer automatically cheaper than a machine that never sleeps. Think of it like arriving at a race. China ran when the track was flat and the prize was speed on foot. India laces up and finds the organizers have paved the track for cars. The runner isn't slow. The race changed. This is the rule that no longer holds. Enough cheap workers used to guarantee the factories. It doesn't anymore. 1 billion workers is still necessary. It has stopped being sufficient. And this isn't a story about India being behind. It is a story about the finish line moving. When Britain industrialized, it needed mills full of hands. When China industrialized, it needed cities full of hands. Each wave still ran on people. The wave breaking now runs, increasingly, on code and machines. India is the first giant to industrialize after the hand stopped being the cheapest tool in the factory. You can see it in a single comparison. A garment factory in the year 2000 employed rows of workers at sewing machines. The most advanced version of that same factory today can produce more with a fraction of the staff. Cutting tables run by software, quality checked by cameras. The output went up. The jobs per unit went down. That is the whole story of this century's factory in one room. And notice what that does to the promise, the old deal. Labor in, ladder up, worked because factories needed armies of people. If a modern factory needs a fraction of that army, the ladder gets narrower exactly as the crowd at the bottom gets bigger. India adds roughly 12 million people to its workforce every single year. 12 million. That is the population of a large country joining the job market annually. And manufacturing. Automated, lean, global. Creates nowhere near enough factory jobs to absorb them. To understand where those value and those jobs actually go, you need one shape. Economists call it the smile curve. Picture the making of any modern product as a line left to right. On the left, research, design, the idea. In the middle, assembly, the physical building. On the right, branding, software, distribution, after sales. Now plot how much money each stage keeps. The two ends. Design and branding sit high. The middle, Assembly sits low. Draw the line and it curves up at both ends and dips in the center, a smile. The value is in the lips. The middle is the chin. Now, the uncomfortable part. Assembly. The made-in part, the part with the factories and the workers, is the bottom of the smile. It is the least profitable stage of the whole chain. Take that iPhone again. Of everything you pay, the largest slices go to Apple, which designed it, and to the firms that make the hardest components, the processor, the screen. The assembly, the part that employs the most people and carries the made-in label, keeps one of the smallest slices of all. The workers are the most visible part of the process and the least rewarded by it. Put one person on that line. A young woman at a plant near Chennai, fitting screens for 9 hours a shift. The chip she handles was designed in California. The screen arrived from South Korea. The brand on the box belongs to a company, an ocean away. Of the phone's final price, her factory keeps a few percent, and her wage is a sliver of that. She is holding the entire smile curve in her hands. Almost none of it is hers. This is where India mostly sits today, at the low center of the curve, doing the physical, labor-heavy, thin margin work, while the fat margins on the design and the brand are captured somewhere else entirely. And a country can get stuck there. That is the danger with assembly. It brings jobs, and jobs are good, but it can also become a comfortable trap. Why invest in the hard, slow work of design when you can keep the factories busy assembling? The middle of the smile is a place that is easy to enter and very, very hard to leave. And this is exactly the trap Episode 2 showed in Vietnam. A country can be covered in factories, humming with output, exporting furiously, and still keep only a thin slice of the value because it never climbed off the bottom of the smile. So the real test for India is not, can it attract factories? It already can. The test is whether it can climb the curve, from assembling other people's designs to owning its own, from the chin to the lips. That climb is hard everywhere. It needs engineers, research labs, patents, brands the world trusts. It took South Korea decades of deliberate effort. And we will get to how next episode. The point here is that arriving at the factory is the easy part. Leaving the bottom of the smile is the hard part. And climbing gets harder still when the factory floor beneath you is quietly filling with machines. The rungs of the ladder are the jobs. Automation is sawing through the lowest rungs just as the largest generation in India's history reaches for them. Now, none of this is destiny. India could climb, but it has to climb carrying weight. China didn't. And that weight is everything around the factory. China built the ports to ship from, the highways to truck on, the power plants to run the machines, the supplier networks so a part is never more than a few hours away. A factory is the center of a web, and China spent 30 years spinning it. Start with the ground itself, moving goods across India. The roads, the ports, the power. Costs more and takes longer than it did across the China that built the boom. A factory is only as fast as the road out of it, and the road out is still, in many places, a bottleneck. Then, land and labor rules. China could clear enormous sites and organize labor at a scale and speed that is far harder in India's system. Building a factory the size of a small city is not just an engineering problem, it is a legal, political, and human one. Then, the workforce itself. And one figure should stop you. Only around a quarter to a third of Indian women take part in the formal labor force, half the population, largely outside the factory economy. China's boom ran, in part, on women pouring into its factories. India is trying to industrialize with a large share of its potential workers still on the sidelines. That is the world's biggest industrialization, attempted with one hand tied. China won the factory race because it got a vast share of its people, men and women. Onto the factory floor. India is attempting the same climb with far fewer of its people in the game. And skills. A modern factory doesn't just need hands, it needs trained hands. Technicians who can run and repair the machines that replace the manual work. Building that skill base across a country of 1.4 billion is a generational project, not a 5-year one. This is the part that gets lost in the excitement over a new plant opening. A factory announcement is a photograph. A skilled workforce is a film that takes 20 years to shoot. You can build the building in 18 months. You cannot build the engineers, the supervisors, and the repair technicians in 18 months. And the machines don't wait. And there is a competitive fact that makes this urgent rather than academic. India is not only measured against China. The World Bank has pointed out that India has been losing labor-intensive manufacturing share to much smaller rivals. Bangladesh in garments, Vietnam in electronics. Think about what that means. Countries with a fraction of India's population, a fraction of its engineers, a fraction of its domestic market. Winning the exact segment India needs as its first rung? How? By being easier to operate in. Simpler rules, faster clearance, fewer surprises, which tells you the binding constraint was never scale. 1 billion workers does not help if the paperwork takes longer than the production run. Put those together, logistics, land, labor participation, skills, and you get the constraint the cheerful headline never mentions. The obstacle was never a shortage of people. It is turning that crowd into a workforce a modern, automated factory actually needs. There is a name for the danger in all this. The economist Danny Roderick called it premature deindustrialisation. His finding is unsettling. Today's developing countries are hitting their peak of manufacturing and then declining at a lower level and an earlier stage than the rich countries ever did. They start running out of factory jobs before they get rich. The escalator stops halfway up. And India shows the fingerprint. Manufacturing share of its jobs appears to have peaked around 2002 at a modest 13% and drifted since. A country of 1.4 billion may be running low on factory jobs before most of its people ever reached one. That is the crisis underneath the optimism. India can build. It builds plenty. The danger is that it stops needing factory workers before it has finished lifting its people up the ladder those workers were supposed to climb. So, can India become the next factory of the world? The honest answer is, it is already a factory of the world. It just may never be a factory in the way China was. The reason sits in 3 figures, and each one is worth writing down. Figure 1, 13%. That is manufacturing share of India's economy, against China's 25%. India's factories are real and large in absolute terms, but as a share of the whole, and measured against the giant it hopes to replace, they are a fraction. Output is not the problem. Position is. Figure 2, 12 million. The people joining India's workforce every year. A tide of young workers arriving at exactly the moment automation is reducing how many the factory needs. The crowd is growing as the door narrows. Figure 3, 2001, the year the old rulebook was written, the year cheap labor alone could summon the world's factories. India is playing the game published now, not then, and the new edition has a different first rule. Bring the workers, yes, but bring the engineers, the infrastructure, and the climb up the smile curve, or stay at the bottom. And notice what all 3 figures have in common. None of them says India is weak. India is not weak. It is one of the largest economies on earth, and it is growing fast. The figures say something subtler and harder. They say the door India is walking through is a different door than the one China walked through, and it is narrower, and it is closing a little each year that automation advances. So say it plainly, India will make more things. That was never in doubt. The real question was never whether India could be the world's workshop. It was whether the world still hands out the prize that being a workshop once won. China caught the last train under the old rules. Mass labor, mass factories, a straight climb up. India arrived at the platform to find the timetable rewritten. It can still make the journey, but it has to build a different train on a steeper track, carrying a heavier load. And it has to do it before 12 million people a year run out of patience. If that sounds abstract, go back to the woman in Chennai. The question of the next 20 years is whether she is still fitting screens shipped in from somewhere else, or whether the screen, the chip, and the name on the box are hers. That is what climbing the curve means, and it is the only version of this story where her wage truly changes. That is not a prediction of failure. It is a warning about difficulty. The next factory of the world, if there is one, won't be built the way the last one was. It will be won by the country that climbs the smile curve, not just the one with the most hands. Which raises the obvious next question. If arriving at the factory is easy and climbing the value chain is hard, has anyone actually done it? Gone from poor to workshop to owner of the design and the brand? One country did it faster and more completely than almost any in history. It started poorer than much of the world, with few resources and a war-torn economy, and turned itself into a maker of the very chips, cars, and phones the rest of this season has been chasing. Next time on The Rise Index, South Korea's economic miracle, how a nation climbed the entire smile curve in a single generation and the hidden cost of doing it. This is The Rise Index. Subscribe and follow where power moves next.